I'm not going to delay. Let's just bring out the person on whose memoir this was based, and she adapted the screenplay, Carolyn Briggs. And it was Vera Farmiga's directorial debut. And this is my second time seeing it. And this time I know how it makes me feel. I was watching the director's touch, stellar. So we have a gift for you. At our festival, we give out a golden thumb. Nate, will you bring it out, please? And we give it out, and I don't want to shortchange this. Someone said, you don't talk about the thumb much anymore when you give it. Well, you know, it's a beautiful thumb, and it is a casting of Roger's thumb, and it's made by the same people. You see how heavy it is? Made by the same people who make the Academy Awards. So this is your Academy Award, your Ebert Award here at the Film Festival. And will you join us in a Q&A? Why don't we seat you right here in the center, and then we'll bring out our two people for a Q&A. We're going to bring, I'm really happy to have Nell Minow talk about this movie with Carolyn, because Nell is, in addition to she's a corporate governance lawyer, she's also a film critic. And she is also known as the movie mom, but she writes on BeliefNet.com, but she writes about films she's brilliant. She's the daughter of Newt Minow, who coined the phrase, TV is a vast wasteland. And I'm a friend of her mom's. I love her mom. So anyway, Nell Minow, sorry. And of course, our friend from Sony Pictures Classics, Michael Barker.
Well, that was an extraordinary film. It was my second time seeing it, and it was wonderful to see it with this great audience. Oh, yeah. What I want to do, first of all, I'm an author myself, so I know the most important thing, hold up the book, everybody. Okay, I want you all to read it. And I'm going to begin by asking you a little bit about the experiences you describe in the book and that are in the movie. Then I want to talk about the movie, and I want to ask you about some of the things Vera Farmiga told me when I interviewed her, and we are going to get to the penis picture, and I want you all to start thinking about your questions as well. Okay, when you're filling out a form and they ask you your religion, what do you say?
Vera and I talked about this a lot. We both agree with Rilke that it's a beautiful thing to learn to love the questions themselves. So I would probably leave that blank. Yeah, I would just probably leave that little box blank.
Okay. One thing that I was very struck by as I watched the movie and read the book is that there is a strong parallel between the Christian tradition of testimony and the literary tradition of memoir. And since you teach relating to storytelling, I wanted you to talk about the parallels between those two.
Wow. Testimony and memoir. When I was in graduate school, because poor Corinne, she never makes it to college in the film, but eventually she does go to school, in graduate school, and one of my professors told me, you know, if you wrote your memoir, you could sell the shit out of it if you told the truth. So that was the way I wrote the memoir, just being honest and truthful, and somebody said that the best way to write is cut open a vein and bleed on the page. So I
Red
think
Smith
is
is
that
the
Red
one who
Smith?
said that. Yeah, that's right. In the book, one of the differences between the book and the movie is that in the movie, in a scene that is, I think, my favorite scene in the movie, she's in the bathroom saying, please let me, please, I want it, I want it. But in the book, you get it, right? You do find that prayer language. What is that experience like?
Wow, how do you explain that to someone? Wrote a poem about it, actually. Like a burning ember in my chest. That's what I said after it happened.
The original title of the memoir is This Dark World. That's a very different connotation from the movie. Was that a marketing decision? Was that an artistic decision?
No, I titled the screenplay Higher Ground. I just wanted to show that after 10 years, this phrase, this dark world, is from the scripture. It's talking about the powers and principalities of this dark world. And I think in 10 years that I have evolved, and I only look at those 20 years in the church as a good thing. And I've met a lot of people who have seen the film who want me to be bitter, who want me to be angry, and you were so condescended to, your voice was taken away, you didn't have opportunity. But I think it all came out to good. I think I learned, I think I grew, and I'm only grateful.
Absolutely. As Thoreau said, there's a time to go to Walden and a time to leave.
Right, that's beautiful.
Michael, tell me how you came to this movie. Did you come to it when it was already made, or were you involved in the earlier stages?
I want to ask one question.
Go for it.
I've always wanted to ask this question because most movies I've had that have been memoirs and so forth, the subjects are always dead.
Oh.
So my question is, when you watch the movie, do you see yourself? Do you have an other body experience? What is it like to watch a movie about yourself and you're played by a movie star?
Right.
What is that like?
Yeah.
3 movie stars.
Yeah, 3 movie stars. It's surreal, obviously. It's sometimes I watch it, and I think this was the 26th time I've seen it. Sometimes I watch it, and some scenes are really resonant with me, and others aren't. But today, watching it, that last scene with Ethan, after she kissed him on the mouth, that look on his face, I mean, instant tears came to my eyes, and of course, I'm associating that with my real life. So.
Is most of the film accurate according to your book, or did they take a lot of poetic license?
I think I tell my students who are writing creatively that you can lie your way to the truth. And so real life sometimes isn't as true as what you can make up. So to answer your questions, there are some made-up scenes.
Yeah.
Like, I just have to say, guys, there was never a baby in a cooler. Sorry.
Yeah. Hollywood.
That was Hollywood.
Anyway, to answer your question, I'm sorry, I was interrupted.
That was actually on my list, so you're doing
I'm
great.
sorry. When you go to the Sundance Film Festival and you see all these movies, and so many of them are not very good, and the ones that are good really shine and so forth. And the key is the human connection as well as the business connection of what a film can do. And we saw this film, and I grew up in Texas, in a small part of Dallas called Oak Cliff, where there was a church on every block, and it was a dry area of Dallas. And I had never seen a movie like this. We've seen so many movies about doubt of religion, but all of those movies about doubt are really angry against religion, and this movie has respect of religion, and I was kind of taken aback. And then my partner saw it, and he is not religious at all, and he was taken aback by the dimension of what Vera Farmiga has done here. I mean, Vera Farmiga, I wish she was here, because I tell you something, we've seen this movie in so many different type of places. This is a very special screening because in this, I'm sorry to digress, but in this part of the country, there's something different about it. The scene that you referred to, the birthday scene at the end, I have never seen an audience response like this audience. And it is an incredible scene, and it's very complicated, the different shots and the way every character looks at each other. You see every level of pain, and it's still a family and everything. And kind of what's interesting, you see that movie in New York City, for example, or in Salt Lake City, the reaction is, oh, it's very well done. When you see it here, you were with every moment in that scene, and we felt like we were living that scene with it. I'd never experienced that before, and I think that has something to do with this part of the country connecting, and I wish Vera was here to see that, because it would overwhelm her. It really would. But anyway, so we saw the movie, and I was supposed to leave the next morning, and we watched it again because my colleague saw it, and it was something that we weren't sure of what the business dynamics would be, but we knew sure how good it was, and that it really had possibilities, if not in the first run, then in the DVD and the afterlife and in the international and so forth. So I was supposed to leave the next morning, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I thought, okay, well, let's call the producer out of the blue. And the producer said, well, you have to meet Vera. I said, I'm leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning. And they invited me over to where Vera and her husband and all the producers were staying at like 1:30 in the morning. So I went and I sat on this big chair opposite Vera, and the producers were there, and it was incredible. She is in so deep in every aspect of your life, and your memoir allowed her to connect with her family, and she's a staggering kind of Renaissance type of person, and we were so overwhelmed that the next morning my colleagues and I got together and we got the movie. That doesn't warrant applause, but...
For those of you who don't know, when you talk about connecting with her family, that is her younger sister playing Corinne's earlier self, and that's why she looks and moves and acts so much like her.
And also her husband was one of the producers, and basically made a lot of those brilliant song music selections in the film. I mean, it's very much a family affair. And I have to say something else. The producers of this film, all of them, were very, very special, you know. It's like everyone involved in this film are such professionals. They're real pros. And, you know, you look at that cast, and I'm sure Vera was able to amass them because she's so well respected. Norbert Leo Butz is just a great stage actor, and Donna Murphy, and John Hawkes from Winter's Bone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a professional movie, so well done.
For those of you who might not know, Donna Murphy is not only a great Broadway star, but most importantly, she's the evil stepmother in Tangled. And how many of you recognize John Hawkes from Winter's Bone? Yeah? Well, Vera told me that one of the things that really made it possible for her to do the movie was that she got a lot of help from Deborah Granick, who was the woman who directed Winter's Bone, and I guess John Hawkes was part of that package.
But also, she starred in Deborah Granick's previous film, which she was fantastic. What was it called? Down to the Bone.
Can I just add really quickly, too, you might be interested that the baby who played my daughter was actually Vera's son, who had to wear a dress, and his father was not too thrilled with that. And one more little just gossipy thing is her little sister, Thaisa, the teenager, Corinne, got her first kiss on screen.
I thought that was acting. That was good. Going back to your work as a writer and as a teacher of writing, tell me a little bit about the challenges of adapting a memoir to the screen. Of course, you combined some characters and you skipped over some parts, but tell me a little bit about the kind of adaptation to visual storytelling.
When Vera asked me to come on board as the screenwriter, she actually flew to Iowa. And you know, that may be why it's resonating in Illinois, because the book is set in Iowa, and that church is in Iowa. But she flew to Iowa, she and her husband Ren and baby, and stayed with me for a few days, and we sat and looked at the memoir, and we started over. There was an existing script that eventually was completely rewritten, but we went to the memoir and we went through it page by page by page. This scene will go in, this scene. And then we knew that we had to do some inventing. As I said, the bus accident didn't happen. My ex-husband, did travel in a bus with a band, but in my memoir, the conversion that my teenage husband and I had was by reading the Bible. We just would take the Bible to bed at night and read. And we did that night after night after night. But the producers said, look, you know, that's not very cinematic. Not very exciting. We need a visual. So that's where the bus came in. And there were some other scenes that were invented, some composite characters. My father is the only character who had his real name, CW, and so his is the only real name in the movie. He died the month my book was published, and he was so excited when it was published. You know, it was the biggest thing that had ever happened to him, and threw me a party with all of his retired friends and with a cake with my book cover, decorating it. And it was really great. So I know he would have been so thrilled with this movie. And
How about the mailman?
the mailman. Okay, here's some other gossip. And after Corinne goes to college and changes and whatever, she goes to Ireland and studies for a summer, and she meets an Irish writer who she spends a couple years with, but he turns out to be a really crummy guy. So when I wrote the screenplay, I turned him into a mailman. That was the biggest pleasure of all.
Michael?
I was wondering about that. I don't know many mailmen who
Who are
give
Irish?
books of Yeats.
Michael, what rating does this movie have?
I think it has an R. I can't remember. I think it
can't-
does.
it's
The
either an R or
penises
it's not
caused the
rated.
R.
Yeah, that's right.
And
So
we
what-
couldn't edit that, so.
Yeah, okay, well, I guess that's the question I want to ask you is, are you tempted to try to get edits to get a PG-13?
No.
Does that make it harder?
No. I don't know if it makes it harder. It's just not in our lexicon, you
Okay.
know. Occasionally, you know, they'll say, okay, we want an NC-17 on this, and we feel obligated to go back to the filmmaker, but we would never force the filmmaker to change that.
God
I
bless you.
remember there was this movie, Bad Education, that Pedro Almodovar made,
Right.
and there were a few too many head bobs in an oral sex scene. And they said, take away one or two bobs and you'll get the R. And I had a theory that if it was between a man and a woman as opposed to a man and a man, it would have gotten an R, and so that kind of incensed us. And we would never change any of Mr. Almodovar's cuts anyway. So we went out NC-17.
Carolyn, one thing that affected me very deeply in the memoir and in the movie was your descriptions of friendships, which are so important, and the Anika character is so magnificent in this movie. What is the actress's name?
Which actress?
Who played Anika?
I cannot pronounce her name.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you.
Dagmara
Yeah.
Dominic, I think.
Dominic.
Yeah, she's wonderful. So can you talk a little bit about what that gives to the story, the real life story and the cinematic story?
Yeah, somebody in the it was 2 weeks ago, this film screened, if you guys can imagine it, at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. And I was never so uncomfortable as screening in my life. I thought, please, not another F word, please. But no, there would be another one. And those penis drawings were panned slowly. The guy who was going to interview me afterwards was sitting beside me. But anyway, somebody asked that night at that screening about the friendship between women. And I'm so glad that stands out to you, because that was a huge part of, you're right, my memoir and this movie. And Vera and I really both felt strongly that women's friendships aren't celebrated enough. And that women have so much you know, in common that don't involve, that rather doesn't involve a man. So we, yeah, power to the sisters. And they asked me that night at Fuller, what got you through all those years that you were creatively stunted, that you didn't have opportunities? And I said, women.
We're going to start with audience questions in just a minute. But I want to ask you to respond to some of the things that Vera talked to me about when I spoke to her. When I interviewed Vera, the first thing I said to her was, please talk to me about the hair, because your hair really tells so much of the story in this movie and how many ways that it changed. And I love what she said. She said it went from wild and free and long and tangled and passionate to yuppie hair and a corrupted perm. So did you discuss with her the hair and the dress or anything like that?
She had such a great costume designer and stylist. That's all credit to them. They did a great job. It moved time along to see the hair, you know.
Yeah,
So that was a great narrative device.
I thought it was fantastic. Okay, the other thing that I love that she said was, you know, you always ask, how did you choose this work? And she said, it chose me. It touched me in divinely mysterious ways. It slayed me in the spirit. And so I love that. And she said, however, and this is for you, Michael, she said, selling a God story to Hollywood tends to make people tremble. So how come you didn't tremble?
I'm not in Hollywood.
But you understand what she said.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, the secret weapon on these movies, as far as them eventually becoming profitable, the ones that are really difficult, the secret weapons are people like Vera Farmiga and Asghar Farhadi. I mean, she is tireless in promoting the film and doing the interviews and representing herself and Carolyn and everyone with the film. And not only is it a story, but it's someone that helps you get it out there. And it's the same with Asghar with Separation.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to ask our microphone wranglers to go out there and find some people out there who have questions, so just let them know, and they will come to you. So tell us about the penis pictures.
Well, my friend did draw pictures of her husband's penis, and they were artful, and they were not as numerous as those pictures. But yeah, it's true. It's true. She was a very holy, spiritual woman who dug sex.
All right, one more thing I have to mention from the book that's not in the movie, but I just have to mention it because I love this so much. There's a book called You Can Be the Wife of a Happy Husband.
Yes, back the Fuller people 2 weeks ago, I told them about that book. Yeah, I sat in a Bible study for an entire year studying You Can Be the Wife of a Happy Husband. And
Can I ask a question? Because there's, all right, this is why it came to mind. There's one scene in the movie that every time we watched it, you know, Vera was asking us after Sundance how we could give her advice on how to make it a little leaner and so forth. There's one scene in the movie, it's very early on. It is so outrageous that the question was, how important is, how is it not? Is it real? Is it not real? And that scene when the guys are sitting around talking kind of clinically about this sexual activity, how true to life is that?
that's true. Absolutely, yeah. It wasn't called Christ-like sex, but it was something like that. And there was a doctor, somebody, blank, blank.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I think that's nice.
Yeah.
If people need guidance, let's give it to them. Okay. Let's rescue me, somebody. Who's got a question out there?
Directly in front of you.
No, there's so many different reactions to that scene. You'll after the screening, you'll say, "Oh, what'd you think of that scene?" "Oh, it was kind of cute," you know. And then someone else was totally unnerved by it, you know.
You know, I will say to me it fit in with the kind of crunchy hippie aspect of Christianity that this was. That just as they would talk, I'm sure, about organic food one week, why not, you know?
And Vera always says that there's not enough movies with the word clitoris in them.
Okay.
And that's why she doesn't live in Hollywood.
All right. Who's got a question?
Here we are.
Hi, this is the movie that I came to Ebertfest to see, and I loved it.
Oh,
I appreciated that it respected faith, and I experienced it mostly through the music, music that I sing every week. And I wondered what you thought of the music, and is there a soundtrack?
I wish there were a soundtrack. We went through a lot of music choices, and Vera's husband, Ren Hockey, was the music producer, so he did an excellent job. I think there was a lot of problems trying to find songs that were public domain. A lot of songs that we wanted to use that were contemporary worship songs that really would have fit the hippie, crunchy thing were not available to us. I mean, some Christian artists weren't sure what we were going to do with them and what kind of film we were going to end up with. But Ren Hockey really was responsible for that soundtrack, which I also agree is beautiful.
Thank you. Another question?
Yes, panel. 10 rows to your right. This
Okay.
lady has a question.
Okay.
Among the comments, this is a comment rather than a question, but it may produce a response. Among the things said about this movie very often are how wonderful it is that it doesn't refer to stereotypes, how great it is that the born-again Christians come out so well, etc., with which I agree. But I want to put in a word for small-town public librarians.
Yeah.
I want to continue to say they are usually, not always, among the most liberal, culturally cultivated, open people in their communities.
Yeah. Point taken.
I'm so happy you made that point. I'm the sister of a librarian, and she would be the first one to urge you to check out Lord of the Flies.
Right, well, but I do have to say Mrs. Perkins, who is long dead, would not let me check out The Lord of the Flies.
My mother's a librarian, and it would have driven her crazy too. And all my life, it drove her crazy that the idea of a librarian of being this kind of frigid person makes no sense to her whatsoever.
I wasn't allowed to check out any of the young adult books that I would bring up either. Wow. Just got censored right there.
Another question?
Yes, from the balcony up here to your left.
Okay.
Hi there. Vera's sister Taisa, who played the young Corinne, was so striking. I mean, even beyond just how much she looks and like her sister. Once you get past that, I mean, she's just absolutely remarkable. Do you know, has she acted before? Is she planning to act in the future? Please say yes.
She hadn't acted before, but oh yeah, she has a career. She's in the American Horror Show, or what is it? American Horror Story. She had a running role, and she has 2 parts in 2 movies coming up. She's got quite a career.
Maybe we'll get her here sometime.
Right here to your left.
Just a really quick question. You mentioned that you were in Iowa during this. Why did you move the setting to upstate New York?
That was for budget reasons. Vera lived there. Vera was newly pregnant. She was 4 months pregnant through this whole screening, or whole filming process. So that the studio was 17 miles from our house. It was just convenient.
Wasn't there some kind of tax rebate or something
Yeah,
with New York that really
figured
helped
into
it out? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
And they
when she
have
was-
the right terrain too, so
Right.
it wasn't an issue.
So the scenes of her belly, that was really her pregnant
That
belly?
was really
Because
her
that really
belly.
looked so authentic
Yeah.
to me. I couldn't get over it.
It was real. There's real. She has some scenes where she's not supposed to be pregnant, and she might look slightly pregnant. And Vera says, "Oh, that's just the way a woman who's had 3 children looks." And well, really, I've had 3 kids.
Another question?
Yes, in the back of the theater to the right, gentleman has a question.
Hi, this is a beautiful movie. Thank you for bringing it here. And it's actually the second time I've seen it, and I loved it even more the second time. This question is for Michael. I have always wondered the relationship between theaters and distributors in terms of how little movies like this that are so wonderful but often hard to find outside of the big cities and the festivals, how they find their way into theaters. I'm in East Lansing, Michigan. I came here for the festival from there. We don't have any art theaters currently. We have a couple of multiplexes that will show, for example, Midnight in Paris for a few weeks, or Jeff Who Lives at Home, or Salmon Fishing, or some films like that. If we're lucky, they'll be there for a few weeks. Often those films never come to our town. And I always wonder, who makes those decisions? How do you get films like Higher Ground into theaters outside of New York, Los Angeles, the film festival circuit? Who makes those decisions?
First of all, the marketplace kind of determines those decisions. We're lucky because we've been in business 20 years. My partner and I have been together 31 years. So even the big circuits play our films like Higher Ground. But there is the reality of the business. If in the first week it plays in a theater and it's the lowest gross in the complex, it gets thrown out for something else. I think now is a better time than ever that films have reached the widest number of theaters in the course of its life, you know. Something like Higher Ground starts no differently than the way a film like Midnight in Paris starts. But the fact is that we play it everywhere, or as many places as we can. There are a number of locations that just, they don't play films that are this kind of specialized, and the response is not such that they can sustain a financial run in, I guess, Lansing, Michigan. The fact is, I think it did pretty well in Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor and Detroit and so forth. And what's fortunate about it all is that these big circuits are more and more helping in marketing these movies, as well as the independent chains like Landmark and a lot of these smaller independent theaters. And, you know, we can't get to a gross like Separation, which might get to as high as $9 or $10 million without the big circuits, and so they are part of the equation. It's always harder for an independent film. We're very lucky to have the opportunities once the DVD release happens for the VOD and the pay television. We have a Stars Encore pay television deal, which is very important for these films. The key with the theatrical release, if it doesn't reach these tiny places, is to somehow the title becomes part of the culture, and you remember the title, and if you miss it the first go-round theatrically, you will catch it somewhere else, and Higher Ground is one of those titles. It will keep giving year in, year out, and Sony Classics is testament to that, otherwise we wouldn't be there for 21 years. And that's, I think, the answer.
I also want to say that I'm very happy to see movies like this one and Blue Like Jazz, which I recommend to you. It's really bothered me that there's been this faith-based film niche that is very, very, very narrow. I'm very happy to see movies that deal with faith in a more robust and complex way, and see them be embraced by people of faith and people who are just curious. I think we've got time for one more question.
From the balcony, center.
Yes?
This is in response to something that was said on the stage. I'm a New Yorker by birth and by heart, so I can't speak to the Midwest mentality very well, but I think the response to this movie by this audience is because it is this audience. This is the best audience ever to watch movies with.
I agree.
And you know what? That has to do with this theater.
It has to do with this theater, and it has to do with Roger's choices. That is unquestionably the best movie-going experience. Speaking as somebody who goes to movies 6 or 7 times a week, the best movie-going experience I have is right here in this theater with this group. So thank you all very much.
But I want to say something about that. What I do is all about context, how you see a film, the trappings around which you see a film. The fact that Roger and Chaz picked this film, why they picked this film, they explain it to you very well. It's on this huge screen. We have the creator of the film. We have these other people talking about the film. We have the perfect audience of the film that keeps coming. It's like the perfect context to appreciate. You're open to whatever the film has, and that's the perfect context. And a lot of it has to do with Roger, you know. I got an email this morning from Asghar Farhadi. I'm sorry to digress again. Asghar Farhadi, from the director of The Separation, and he said, "I'm so upset I couldn't go. will you tell Mr. Ebert I'm really sorry I couldn't be with him, and tell him he may not know this, but he is better known in Iran than I am.
Will you join me in thanking our wonderful panel? Thank you so much.